Hey everyone, welcome back for another episode of NHL Daily Talk. And instead of news or scores or anything, today we're doing NHL playoff brackets. But I have two special guests here, so you know, speak up. Which I don't know, whoever wants to go first.
Hey again. I came back for more, so hope the bracket actually turns out pretty good.
That's good. And then,
It's me.
what's your name?
Good evening.
Yes, and this is Kalan's girlfriend. For those of you who may or may not know, well, probably none of you know because you don't know them. But on this note, let's finish this intro. And obviously, they've already made their brackets, but I said I'd make mine on the video, and I'm gonna go over all the analysis and whatnot. But yeah, we have a little league going, and I'll leave the code in the description to go, or the password, I guess, in the description down below. But obviously, the league is Iacob Aaron, which is Iacob's name. So if you guys want to join the league, feel free to. And yeah, you got until tomorrow, I guess. But obviously, we'll go over our first round matchup, which sees the Colorado Avalanche face off against the LA Kings. And Kellen, do you want to summarize these, statistics real quick?
I mean, as we all know, obviously Colorado is a much more high-paced, high-scoring team compared to Los Angeles and its park the bus games. I mean, the season points are very, very, very vast here with 121 going to Colorado and obviously 90 going to LA. The goals per game obviously very low for LA as always, 2.7 though, so a little bit of an improvement versus Colorado's egregious 3.7 per game, which is absurd. Goals against, I mean, obviously you got to give it to LA because once again their goaltending is not completely on par with Colorado's double tandem there. 3 goals per game against. That's not terrible, but it's not too good either. In Colorado with the 2.5, so obviously it really does show that they did a good job up in there. Power play percentage is very similar though, which is interesting to think about considering you have all those elite players up top and see that Colorado's only on par with LA really does frighten me there. Other than that penalty kill, I mean, you'd expect as much from their top two. 84.6 there, and then LA's lackluster 74.6. But what do you expect?
Well, obviously, we know, with the playoffs that any series can go either way, and you never know exactly what's going to happen. But enough said.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which, I mean, obviously, for those of you, don't be surprised, if LA wins a couple games or whatever. But I think Colorado takes this series as, you'll see in other people's brackets, but generally they seem to be the favorite amongst, all fans and pretty much anyone involved. But now we have our second matchup, with all do the analysis for this one. So this is number 2 and 3 in the Central Division, which sees the Dallas Stars versus the Minnesota Wild. And the Stars will have home ice advantage as they had 112 points in the regular season versus the Wild's 104. Then if we look at goals for per game, they're actually relatively close as the Stars scored 3.4 per game versus the Wild's 3.3. So 0.1 difference. Is that going to make a difference in the playoffs? Probably not, but ultimately you never know. And same for goals against. Minnesota allowed just 0.1 more, but obviously that reflects for their, 8 points less, but still not an egregious difference. But then the special teams is where the Stars have a little bit of an edge. They got 3.4% on the power play over the Wild. And of course, their penalty kill is just 0.5 better. And their leading point scorer in Jason Robertson having 96 versus the Wild's 89 for Kaprizov is a slight difference. But albeit I don't think it's a huge upset, but I'm taking the third placed Minnesota Wild to beat the Colorado Avalanche. And Kellen, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, to have them up against Yaps is honestly what you'd expect out of most brackets there, especially since Dallas is just, I mean, it's such a close game, but honestly, when you compare the two, just the upper edge with Minnesota's goaltending and even their defensive structure is just, I think at the end of the day, more often than not, you'll see a Minnesota win.
Which, I mean, I'm taking Minnesota, but, obviously you're welcome to disagree, and you can call me an idiot if you want, but
yeah,
that's all up to you. But here, you can give the Analysis for Utah versus Vegas.
I mean, this is pretty much trash versus garbage. Vegas Golden Knights versus the Utah
Holy
Mammoth. What a very
wow.
boring series and tight one this one's going to be. It might not be too boring, but we'll see. They're very close.
Wow.
95 season points for Vegas, 92 for Utah. The goals per game is actually on par at 3.3 flat, as well as the goals against per game is 3.0. Power
Wow.
play is very, very similar here. We got Vegas is a little better than the last ones we talked about at 24.6, and then Utah is sitting around that 20% margin, which is not too bad.
Mm-hmm.
The penalty kill is about on par there with 81.4 going to Vegas statistically, and then the 78 Utah, honestly not bad with their leading goal scorers only being two apart between Jack Eichel at 90 and Clayton Keller at 88. So honestly, very tight series. I think it'll definitely just come down to which superstar can produce the most, and on top of that, how far their goaltending goes, especially since you got Carter Hart's first year back.
And then, of course, we know Vegas still has Aiden Hill, and they also have Akira Schmid. So they have three guys they can choose from. And for the Mammoth, it's a pretty obvious choice in Vamelka. And if Vamelka falters, they're done. But, I had my opinion before, but I honestly think after the analytics, my opinion's changed a little bit. And I'm actually going to take the Utah Mammoth to beat the Vegas Golden Knights in this one, as I do think it's going to be a close series. And you guys will see my game predictions shortly here, but I'm going to go through, pick all the teams first, and we'll go from there. But obviously, our next matchup here, we have the Oilers facing off against the Anaheim Ducks, which, the Oilers had 93 regular season points versus the Ducks 92, and bless you, Kalan. But obviously, the points were 1 point difference, so not a huge deal. But going to goals for per game, the Oilers scored 0.2 more as they got 3.5 versus the Ducks 3.3, so not a large margin, but, it's definitely a little bit, and obviously it could matter come playoff time. But on top of that, the Oilers allowed 0.3 less goals per game as they would allow 3.3, and the Ducks would allow 3.6, which, to be honest, the Ducks' analytics don't really look that great on paper, and it's hard to really, say that they're going to do great in this series. But obviously, the Oilers dominate on the power play as they have a 30.6%, which is league leading, by the way, versus the Ducks' 18.6. And especially with their kill, obviously neither team's kill is amazing as the Oilers only have a 77% versus the Ducks 76, but a 30% power play versus a team that struggles on the penalty kill, it could be torture for the Ducks, and ultimately we'll see. But going to your leading scorers, Connor McDavid had 138 points, which obviously won the Art Ross as we spoke about earlier today, and then Cutter Gauthier with his 69 points for the Anaheim Ducks would lead the way for them. And I mean, I'm an Oilers fan. Obviously, I have a little bit of bias in the series, but I still don't see a world where Edmonton doesn't win. And Kellen, do you agree with that, or do you think that the Ducks have more of a chance than I'm giving them credit for?
Yeah, I mean they definitely could win. I mean, as we know, the goaltending situation in Edmonton is pretty much as shit as it gets, especially for the last 3 years. It's never really improved, and some could argue it's honestly gotten worse. In the starter position, though, to be honest, they do make up for it in pretty much every other aspect of the game there compared to Anaheim. So I genuinely do believe, as long as they keep it semi together, they're easily going through.
Absolutely, and obviously, Dostal is pretty solid goalie, and we saw what he did at the Olympics for Czechia. So, keep a lookout for that. But no, I think regardless, it'll be, maybe a somewhat close series, but I ultimately give Edmonton the edge. And obviously, we'll go over your games. This one for Colorado versus LA. We looked at the metrics. LA got dominated every single metric, and I'm giving the Kings no credit here. I think they're getting swept, which obviously you guys are all obligated to your own opinion, but that's what I think. I think, very well the Kings could win a game or two, but I think this series goes max 6, and Kings lose every single time, in my opinion. Regarding Minnesota versus Dallas, I think this will be a very close one, obviously, as these two teams match up very well, but I think the Wild will get the better of the Stars in a total 7 games, and we'll see what happens, of course, but I'm taking Minnesota. And then, obviously, I'm taking Utah to beat Vegas, which is definitely a bit of an upset, but I think this series will also be relatively close, but I actually think the Mammoth will get the edge in 6 games, and, I mean, a lot of people might disagree, but you know, who knows? And personally, I don't care. And then, of course, in our final Western Conference matchup for the first round, we have Edmonton versus Anaheim. And I think the Oilers will get the better of the Ducks in 6 games. And I will submit that. And now we'll move out east, which Kalen's gone, so I'll recap this first one here as the Buffalo Sabres will be facing off against the Boston Bruins, and the Sabres will have home ice advantage. And, the regular season, obviously, the Sabres had 9 more points at 109 versus the Bruins 100. And then if we look at the goals for per game, the Sabres scored 3.5 per game versus the Bruins scoring 3.3. So relatively close, although the Bruins do play a harder style of hockey and tend to try to keep the puck out of the net more than score. And obviously the Sabres still had the slight edge in goals against per game as they would allow only 3 versus the Bruins who would allow 3.1. And still close, but Buffalo had a better regular season. But power play, actually, the team that is not the favorite in this one, the Bruins, have the slight edge. They had a 23.4% on the power play in the regular season versus the Sabres, who had a 19.5, which I actually expected a little bit better, but obviously those are the stats, and the statistics say more than my opinion. And then, of course, for the penalty kill, the Sabres have a 5% edge at an 82 versus a 77. And then, looking at the leading point scorers, Tage Thompson had 81 points for the Sabres, and David Pastrnak had 100. But, obviously the Sabres being in the playoffs for the first time in 14 seasons, I think that because they actually led the Atlantic in the season that they had, I think that they will actually win their first playoff series in a long time. What do you think about that, Kellen, since you just came back to sit down?
Well, I have them going a very long way. And just looking through the whole Boston season, it's really not much to go home to. Just arguably, I think Buffalo really does take the cake there.
I do know that the Bruins obviously have, arguably the best player in the series. I will say the best player in David Pastrnak because he is amazing. And then, of course, they have some veterans and they are a playoff tested team. And I do think they will win a couple games, spoiler alert. But yeah, I don't think they're taking Buffalo down. But all right, you want to recap this next series here, which it's a close one, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, another one just kind of like that Utah versus Vegas series here. Tampa and Montreal, I mean, season points are exactly the same at 106. Goals per game, also the same at 3.5.
Mm-hmm.
Their goals against around, 2.8 for Tampa, though you'd expect as much with Vasilevsky playing, versus 3.1 with Montreal. And then power play, very similar again, 20.7 for Tampa and the 23.1 for Montreal, which honestly shows they're starting to get a little better there. Penalty kill, I mean, of course, the big edge to Tampa there at an 82.6, so 78.2 doesn't look too bad for Montreal considering what they have to use. Leading scores, I mean, between the two, it's pretty much night and day. Nikita Kuch at 130 as always, and then Nick Suzuki finally broke 100 for the first time in a very long time, 101.
Absolutely, but no, obviously, we know that Tampa's a playoff tested team. Montreal made it in for the first time last season, and obviously because of regulations and wins and all the time rankings stuff, Tampa Bay will have home ice advantage in the series. And albeit I do think it's the two teams are pretty close, but I think it will all come down to Montreal's goaltending and whether or not they can get consistent performances from Dobesh or Montembeau or you know Jacob Fowler, depending on who they decide to play. But ultimately, I will take the Tampa Bay Lightning to beat the Montreal Canadiens, and that's my pick. But obviously, you guys can make your own picks. But moving on to Ottawa versus Carolina. Obviously, Carolina will have home ice as in the regular season. They were substantially better, having 113 points versus Ottawa's 99. But we all know that Eastern Conference was very good, and Ottawa was the last team to make it in. But looking at goals for the Canes had a .2 advantage as they would score 3.6 per game versus the Sens 3.4. So Senators are a solid offensive team, but so are the Canes. So watch out for a lot of offense in this series. But looking at goals against, neither team is egregiously bad as the Canes allowed 2.9 per game versus the Sens 3. And obviously, yeah, it's close and I think a lot of people are actually saying that they think Ottawa's going to win, but put my take in on that. But power play is really close as the Canes are at 24.9%, and obviously the Sens are at 24%. So both teams will likely score some power play goals, but the Canes have a pretty sizable advantage on the PK as they were at 80.5 versus the Sens 75.7. And then we go to leading point scorers, which neither team truly has a, I guess, game breaker, we'll call it. And, for the Canes, their leading point scorer was Sebastian Aho at 80 points. And then Tim Stutzla for Ottawa had 83, so the Suns actually had the leading scorer out of the two teams. But I don't know. For those of you who are, counting the Canes out and saying that Ottawa's going to win, I think you guys are wrong. And I'm actually going to take the Canes to win this series. And as for how far they're going to go, I mean, I haven't exactly decided in my mind yet, but I don't think Ottawa's winning a series. And then, of course, we have the Battle of Pennsylvania, which this is the final matchup in that Eastern Conference before, of course, we move on to, the second round. But the two teams would tie for season points, but obviously the Penguins would have the tiebreaker and they will have home ice advantage. But goals for per game, the Penguins actually dominate by a zero point 0.6 goals per game advantage. And obviously they sit at 3.6 per game versus the Flyers 3.0 per game. And yeah, they have no problem scoring. And the Flyers struggle to score at times, but when you go to goals against, the Flyers are actually the team that has the advantage in that category by 0.2. And it'll be a matter of can the Philly defense hold up against the Penguins' high flying offense? And, can the Penguins break through? But, I mean, obviously, I think the goaltending is pretty 50-50, and these two teams are pretty close in that regard. But obviously, power play, the Flyers have one of the worst power plays in the league at a 15.7% versus the Penguins 24.1. And looking at the penalty kill, the Penguins have the advantage again at 81.4 versus 77.6. And then leading point scorer, obviously for the Pens, it's Sidney Crosby at 74 points, and for the Flyers, it's Travis Konecny at 68. And honestly, and more factors than one, and honestly, just vibes and everything around both teams, I will be taking the Penguins to beat the Flyers, and I don't think they'll come as a surprise to most. Which, Kel, what do you think about my Eastern Conference predictions? If you want to just take a quick glance at it.
Uh, I mean, everything seems up to par right here. You got Buffalo over Boston. That's no brainer. I mean, Tampa Bay beating Montreal is going to be very tight, but yet again, it could also be fairly easy. It all depends on how Montreal's young guns trying to handle the pressure there. Carolina versus Ottawa. I mean, it's got to be Carolina. Ottawa's been shaky since day one of this year, especially looking at Allmark's big dramatic season.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think they're going to go very far. I think the locker room's a bit shaken from that still, and I think it's just better off to just wait till next year. Pittsburgh versus Philly. I mean, a little biased here, but I still think Pittsburgh 9 times out of 10, only just for Sidney Crosby. I mean, the guy's been through a beautiful career, and I really think he does deserve to go through a couple more rounds before
Yeah.
he calls it quits.
Yeah, at least one win would be nice because obviously, in the last several times the Penguins have made it, they really haven't had much success. But looking at this Buffalo Boston series, I do think, with the Bruins being playoff tested and having that experience, I think they will find a way to muster up 2 wins. But I think the Sabres will get it done in 6, which, to be honest, they could get it done in less. But I'm giving the Bruins some credit as I do think they deserve some because they are not that horrible. But obviously I have the Lightning beating the Canadians, and I'm gonna be honest. I was thinking this. I was thinking pretty close, but I actually think that the Lightning are going to, take advantage of this young Habs team, and I actually think the Lightning are going to get it done in 5 games. Which I don't know, Kellen. Do you think that's too little, or what do you think?
I don't know. I mean, it really all depends on that just the young core in general. I mean, the D core can be very shaky at times, as we've seen. So it really all depends on who they really play up front.
Mm-hmm.
Though, to be honest, Vasilevsky has found his game again, and then counting that, they do have a pretty big player there in Dylan Radish. So at the end of the day, I really think Tampa just comes out on top just from sheer experience.
Yeah, but no, I'm giving them a lot of credit, and I mean Montreal. Feel free to prove me wrong, and we'll see what happens. But yeah, that's what I'm taking. Then Carolina versus Ottawa. I mean, I do think that the Sens will be able to, take a couple games, but ultimately, I think Carolina will get it done in 6 games. And I mean, albeit, I think this could be a fun series. I don't see, a whole lot going on there. And obviously, yeah, I'm giving the edge to Carolina. And then for Pittsburgh versus Philly, I do think, that the Flyers are going to find a way to get at least a couple wins here. And obviously, these two teams are close in the regular season, but I would love to see a long battle of Pennsylvania. And honestly, for that reason, I think I'm going to take the Penguins in 7, and ultimately Crosby and friends will get it done. But yeah, I think we're going to see a long series as the Flyers obviously are gritty and they'll find ways to get wins when it looks like they can't. But those are my predictions for the games, and we'll move back to the Western Conference because obviously now I don't have to make predictions on the amount of games that I think are going to happen. I just have to make the predictions on obviously what team is going to win at this point, and I just want to check where we're at. We're 20 minutes in. Well, it's okay. We're just having some fun, but honestly, this matchup between Colorado and Minnesota, I do think it's going to go 5 or 6 at the minimum, probably 6, but I think Colorado's going to get it done, and I mean, for Colorado to make it out of the Central, I don't think that's a surprise to majority of people. And then going over to the Pacific, I think that Edmonton will get the edge over Utah, and I think Edmonton and Colorado will face off in the conference final. And then, of course, we'll move over to the East now, which we'll see Buffalo face off against Tampa. And
Oh yeah.
what, you're thinking about food now?
No.
Mm.
Buffalo.
Buffalo? Oh, bro, saying, oh yeah, Buffalo.
I need a Logan Stanley Finals this year, man.
Logan Stanley needs to get out of the first round, I guess, according to Kalan. But I mean, I don't know. I'm gonna be honest. I know you obviously took the Buffalo Sabres to go quite a ways, but I don't know, man. I feel like this is, you know, one of their true tests, and this is the first true test that they'll have to see if they are ready to make that true next jump and truly push to be one of the best teams in the league and make the finals. But I think that Tampa is going to shut them down, Kellen, unfortunately, and I think we will see. Uh, do I think that though? My mind's telling me yes, but my heart's telling me no. Buffalo, Buffalo. I think we'll see the Buffalo Sabres win there, and yeah, no, I mean, I'd love to see them go on a run, and at this point, you know what? It's all off vibes. I'm following my heart here, so that's what I'm thinking. And then for Carolina Pittsburgh, oh, my mind's telling me yes, but my heart's telling me no. I really want to choose Pittsburgh because I don't really care for Carolina, but I don't know. Is there really like a world where we actually see a Buffalo Pittsburgh conference final?
I mean, it would be very tough to see, especially since Carolina's just got that insane edge. It would be tough for sure, but I know Pittsburgh obviously really knows how to get it done at the end of the day. And I think they're gonna find some decent footing with Stuart Skinner and that net. And if not, Arthur Shilov's both very good competitors when it comes to playoff games. So I don't know. It could really go both ways.
That's very true, and man, I don't really know. I mean, it's gonna be tight either way, but I don't want to see this happen. But I, you, mm, I should have come up with this in advance, but I'm just like having a rough time deciding. You know what? Just to make it more fun, and obviously, the likelihood of me getting a perfect bracket's very unlikely. Anyways, I'm going to take the Penguins to beat the Canes,
All right.
which we'll see what Pittsburgh can do, but I don't think it's impossible. And albeit unlikely, I mean, I've seen crazier things happen, and we've seen crazy things in recent memory. Obviously, Tampa getting swept by a Columbus team in 2019, and then a team that got third in the league in the Flames in 2020. I don't know. I think it was 2022, and they got, or not 2022. I think it was 2019 as well. So they got rolled by the Avalanche in 5 games, which the Avs were expected to get destroyed in that series. So anything can happen, but Now we're down to my final four, which I have Edmonton facing off against Colorado, and I don't know. It's basically, do I think my team's going to go through to three straight finals? I mean, I'll never say it's impossible because it's not, but I don't know. The Avs are just so good this year that it's hard to count them out, to be honest. And I think for that reason, I'm going to take the Avs. And I have picked the Oilers to win the last couple of years, and they've lost in both finals. And I don't know. Maybe now that I don't choose them to go to the finals, maybe they won't make it. I don't know what's going to happen, but this is what I think is going to happen, and I got to follow that. And then obviously going out east, we have Buffalo versus Pittsburgh, which I mean it's basically the veteran squad versus the young guns, and I think the veteran squad is going to get it done. Actually, you know what's really funny? I was telling you how I thought Iacob was crazy earlier for having this team make the finals, but yeah, I will take the Pittsburgh Penguins to reach the final after saying that Iacob was crazy for this.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Fair enough.
But I mean, I'm trying to have some fun with it. And on top of that, you never know. But I mean, out of these two teams, the Avs are winning. Let's be honest.
Yeah, it's really,
But it would be fun to see Crosby play against McKinnon. Actually,
yeah. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. No matter how much Dubas magic you sprinkle, it's just at the end of the day going to be an Avs win either way this year. Unfortunately, they're just that much of a dominant team. You know, President's Trophy's curses do come true most of the time, often. But just seeing how much of a powerhouse they are compared to everyone else, regular season or not, I think it's just pretty self-explanatory.
That's true, but weirdly enough, we're going to see Stuart Skinner in three finals based in a row based off of my prediction. But I know these two teams can score, and I honestly think we're going to see a lot of goals in this series. And I think if we see this, I think this series goes 5 or 6. I don't think the Penguins push it to that full 7, but I think we're going to see a high amount of goals, like a lot of 4-3 games, maybe the 5-4 kind of scores. But ultimately, I think we're going to see a total of 34 goals through a total of 5 or 6 games. And then obviously I have read the official rules. I have not. Well, but I'm just going to say that I have. And then, of course, that's it. Submit the bracket, and there you go, folks. So obviously, just to recap real quick, Avs obviously are going all the way, sweeping the Kings, beating the Wild, and beating the Oilers. Obviously, Minnesota will beat Dallas in round 1, but will get eliminated shortly after. And then Utah will beat Vegas, at least in my opinion. And then we'll get eliminated shortly after by the Oilers, who did beat the Ducks as well. And then going out east, the Sabres will make a run going through Boston and Tampa. And obviously, Tampa will beat Montreal. And then Carolina will defeat Ottawa, but then Pittsburgh will promptly beat them along with Philly and Buffalo in the conference finals to advance to the finals where the Avalanche will beat the Penguins. But, we'll see what happens. And then, of course, my tiebreaker in this one, which this is only if I had the same bracket as someone else, it would come down to what was closer. But my tiebreaker is 34 goals in the Stanley Cup final, and should be good. But ultimately, yeah, this is my bracket, and obviously join our league, and I'll leave the code down below. But we'll move on to some other brackets, and we'll go over Iacob's bracket first, which honestly his bracket looks very similar to mine, aside from basically Utah I said was going to win, which obviously he takes Vegas, and he takes Boston to beat Buffalo in the first round, which honestly is pretty interesting, where obviously we see him take Tampa to go to the conference finals instead of obviously me having Buffalo. And then out east he has the Penguins doing very well, but he also has the Sens beating the Canes, and then his final is Edmonton versus Pittsburgh, and I don't know, man. What do you think? Do you think this is going to happen, or is this realistic at all? Or
It's a highly schizophrenic bracket, to be honest. I mean, the most reasonable thing I'm seeing here is Tampa that far, and even the Avs. Other than that, God knows.
His West is honestly not that bad. Aside from I mean the Oilers could beat the Avs. They do have the experience, but I'm taking the Avs. I mean, obviously I want the Oilers, but I gotta say what I gotta say because I gotta be somewhat realistic with my bracket, and yeah, that's it. But
I mean, at the end of the day, he signed it like Chris Brogner, drunk. God knows. But I mean, very good, very decent bracket. I just think it's a little unrealistic on that Pacific side of things, especially even with the Buffalo versus Boston there.
truth be told, though, you never know,
That is fair.
and obviously, we'll see. But to another possibly high schizophrenic bracket, we'll review Kalen's bracket where his Western Conference is pretty similar. Obviously, we all have the same teams meeting in that Western Conference final, and ultimately, up to this point, it's not a surprise to see Colorado and Edmonton there, and Kellen ultimately takes Colorado to advance. And then out east, I think you, aside from Minnesota, I think you took the favorite in every single matchup, which is well, obviously then I guess technically Vegas is the favorite, but are they really? Debatable. But yeah, he takes Buffalo to go on a miracle run and beat Carolina in the conference finals, and ultimately he has the Avs beating them, and then unfortunately does not show any of the games for the series in these pictures. But do you remember your game counts, or generally speaking?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. Well, that's fine, but I mean, ultimately, I don't think this is egregious, and I do think all of this is very possible. And I mean, I just took the Penguins off vibes, and he did the same for the Sabres. So, we'll see what happens, but I like the bracket, and ultimately, yeah, it's pretty good. But then for Kalen's girlfriend, Garjiva, her Western Conference, she took the Avs to beat the Kings, which honestly, taking the Avs to go away is all the way to the Stanley Cup final, which, actually not a bad show. But she takes Dallas to beat Minnesota, which very well could happen. 5 games, we'll see. That might. I personally think that's a little bit short, but it's in the hockey gods' hands. Then Vegas and Edmonton, of course, will win there. And then, of course, we'll go to the eastern side of the bracket where she has Buffalo beating Boston in 6 games, then Tampa beating Montreal, Carolina beating Ottawa, and then Pittsburgh beating the Flyers. And then, of course, the Lightning she has to beat the Sabres, actually, which, I mean, isn't really an upset. I'd argue they're the favorites in that series. And then, obviously, she has Carolina advancing, obviously, all the way to the finals. And then she actually has the Colorado Avalanche winning the Stanley Cup. And, Kellen, personally, I like this bracket. I think it's actually pretty good and arguably the most realistic out of all of ours.
All knowledge shows.
The ball knowledge shows. Well, she says hopes and dreams and probability. And yeah, we'll see, but I like it. And I mean, Carolina going all the way, I wouldn't doubt it. And I don't know, maybe after picking up that Canes jersey, maybe that'll come true. But yeah, I don't know. Let us know down below in the comments whose bracket you like the most. And on that note, I'll show mine off one final time. But I guess let's wrap it up and Kalan give a quick outro, I guess, and then I'll chime in. Oh, I guess he's eating. Do 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 do.
What?
Do, do,
Anyways.
do.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's all just an opinion. We're all just smoking that copium pack if you're not in the playoffs. If you are, congratulations. Screw you. But yeah, at the end of the day, anything can happen. It is the playoffs, and it all comes down to who's the most nitty gritty. We'll see.
Philadelphia Flyers Stanley Cup incoming, by the way.
Yeah, if Noah Wilson acts up.
Is Noah Yolson gonna lock it? Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Well, maybe Rick Tocchet will find a way to get it out of him in Philly, unlike in Van.
Yeah, the only thing they're gonna get out is him.
Yeah. Well, he's gonna get them out of the playoffs. But yeah, anyways, thank you all for watching. Hopefully, you enjoyed us going over our NHL playoff brackets. Thank you, Kalan and Gurjeevan, for making yours. Along with thank you, Iacob, because of course he couldn't join us because he's having fun partying. And, I sent him a text and was like, oh, were you pissed drunk when you made your bracket? And he thought that was disrespectful or something. And obviously I was joking. And sorry, Iacob, if you took offense to that. But yeah, I think it's pretty funny. And yeah, You guys have a good weekend coming up and get out of here, folks. We'll see you next time with obviously, some NHL playoff hockey. Peace out, y'all.